I bought a 1.2 million house directly across the street from my parents after they demanded I give up my room or move out. And honestly, sometimes I still wonder if I went too far. I mean, who does that? Who buys a mansion just to spite their parents? Tell me, if you were in my shoes, would you have done the same thing, or would you have just swallowed your pride and moved into some cramped apartment, letting them win? Because for me, winning became the only option, even if it meant taking things to an extreme I never thought possible. It all started subtly enough years ago when I was still in high school. My relationship with my parents, especially my mom, was always complicated. I was an only child, and while that might sound like a dream to some, for me it meant I bore the brunt of all their expectations, anxieties, and frankly, their need to control. My dad was more passive, always siding with my mom, which only amplified her authority. I was a good kid, got good grades, never caused trouble, but it was never enough. There was always something I could do better, something I wasn't living up to. The house we lived in wasn't massive, but it was comfortable, a 4-bedroom suburban home that felt perfectly adequate for the three of us. My room was my sanctuary, a space I had meticulously decorated and filled with everything that made me, well, it was the one place I felt truly free. After I graduated college, I moved back home as many young adults do. I had landed a decent entry level in our city. Rent was astronomical, and living at home for a year or two to save up felt like the most financially responsible decision. I contributed to the household, paid for my own groceries, helped with utilities, and generally tried to be as little of a burden as possible. I was actively saving for a down payment, dreaming of my own place, my own independence. I even had a dedicated savings account that was growing steadily. I thought we were all on the same page. I truly did. My parents had always emphasized financial stability, so my responsible saving should have been a point of pride for them, right? Wrong. The first cracks in this fragile piece began to show when my cousin Jessica announced she was moving back to our city. Jessica was a few years older than me, and her life had taken a more turbulent path. She'd bounced between jobs, had a couple of failed relationships, and was generally seen as the problem child of the extended family, though I always had a soft spot for her. She was charismatic and fun, but also a bit of a train wreck. My aunt and uncle, Jessica's parents, lived out of state, and when Jessica's latest living situation fell through, my mom, being the saint of the family, immediately offered her a place to stay. I remember the conversation vividly. We were at Sunday dinner, a sacred ritual in our household, when my mom dropped the bomb. Jessica needs a place to stay for a while, she said, her voice laced with that particular saccharine sweetness she used when she was about to demand something outrageous. My dad nodded along, already knowing where this was going. I smiled, genuinely happy for Jessica, thinking perhaps she'd stay in our guest room, which was rarely used. It was a perfectly fine room, a little smaller than mine, but still comfortable. Of course, I said the guest room is free. My mom smiled didn't waver, but her eyes, they hardened. Oh, no, dear, she chirped. Jessica needs a proper space to get back on her feet. Your room is much bigger and has the en suite bathroom. It would be perfect for her. My fork clattered against my plate. I stared at her, utterly dumbfounded. My room. I'd asked, my voice barely a whisper. Mom, I live in that room. Where am I supposed to go? That's when my dad chimed in with his usual meek support of my mom. Well, son, you're an adult now. You can move into the guest room for a bit. It's just temporary. That word, as I would soon learn, meant absolutely nothing in their vocabulary. I tried to argue, to reason with them. I explained that I had spent years making my room my own, that I valued my privacy, and that it felt unfair to displace me for a cousin who, frankly, had options, even if they weren't ideal. But my words fell on deaf ears. My mom pulled out the classic guilt trip. She's family. She needs our help. Aren't you willing to make a small sacrifice for family? The conversation ended with me reluctantly agreeing to let Jessica use my room. I moved in the smaller guest room, feeling a profound sense of resentment blossom within me. It felt like a demotion, a statement that my needs and my space were secondary to everyone else's, especially Jessica's. Jessica moved in, and initially it wasn't terrible. She was apologetic about taking my room, and we even tried to make light of it. But temporary quickly stretched into months. My guest room, which I tried to make my own, never truly felt like it. It was still the guest room, a placeholder. And Jessica, despite her initial apology, started to treat my old room, her new room, as if it had always been hers. She redecorated, moved furniture, and slowly but surely, my lingering sense of ownership faded, replaced by a dull ache of loss. The bigger issue wasn't just the room, though. It was the principle. It was the casual dismissal of my feelings, the expectation that I would simply yield. My resentment simmered, but I kept it mostly to myself, trying to be the good son who didn't cause trouble. I continued to save, continued to work, pouring all my energy into escaping their orbit. I started looking at apartments online, calculating how much more I needed for a down payment, even exploring rental options just to get out. My parents, meanwhile, seemed to enjoy having Jessica around. She brought a certain liveliness, and my mom loved having someone to dote on, someone who seemed to genuinely appreciate her generosity in a way the independent son, perhaps didn't show enough. Months turned into almost a year. Jessica was still there. My temporary arrangement in the guest room had become permanent. I started to bring up my plans to move out more frequently, hoping it would spur some kind of realization in them, a hint that perhaps they should encourage Jessica to find her own place. Instead, my suggestions were met with various forms of dismissal. Oh, darling, you have it so good here? My mom would say. Why rush? Save your money? Or Jessica's still getting on her feet. We can't just kick her out. The guest room, once a temporary solution, was now implicitly being treated as my permanent room. I was no longer expected to reclaim my old one. This unspoken shift infuriated me. It wasn't just about the room anymore. It was about respect, about my autonomy. I felt like I was being treated like a child who had no say in his own living situation, despite being a fully employed, financially independent adult. The tension in the house grew palpable, mostly from my side, though I tried hard to mask it. My parents, oblivious or perhaps willfully ignorant, continued as if everything was perfectly normal. Then came the fateful dinner, the one that solidified my resolve and set me on the path to buying a 1.2 million house. We were once again gathered around the dinner table. Jessica was there too, laughing and chatting with my mom. I was quiet, picking at my food, feeling that familiar knot of frustration tightening in my stomach. I had just gotten a significant promotion at work, which meant a substantial pay raise. I was finally in a position to afford a down payment on a place of my own, perhaps even a small house. I was excited, hopeful. I decided to share the news, thinking it might finally prompt them to see me as an adult, as someone who was ready for his own life. I announced, trying to keep my voice even. It means I can finally afford to put a down payment on a house. I've been looking at a few places in the area. I expected congratulations, perhaps a discussion about how exciting this next step was. Instead, there was a beat of silence. My mom's fork paused halfway to her mouth. Jessica looked up, a flicker of something unreadable in her eyes. Then my mom put her fork down slowly, deliberately. She looked at me, a stern expression replacing her usual dinner, time pleasantness. A house? She asked, her voice dangerously calm. Why would you need a whole house? You can stay here? I explained again patiently that I was ready for my own space, my own independence. I talked about wanting more room, about wanting to start my own life. That's when the bomb dropped. My mom slammed her hand on the table, not a loud bang, but a sharp, startling thud that made us all jump. Her face was flushed, her eyes blazing with an anger I hadn't seen directed at me in years, not since I was a rebellious teenager. Her nof? She practically shrieked, her voice echoing in the sudden silence. This is our house! And frankly, your cousin needs your room more than you do. You're just going to move out, or you're going to accept the guest room as your permanent space. We are not giving Jessica's room back to you. So make a choice. Right now, give up the room and accept the guest room, or move out. My dad, predictably, nodded along, his face a mask of agreement. She's right, son, he mumbled. It's time you either commit to living here on our terms or you find your own place. Jessica sat there wide-eyed, not saying a word, looking between us like a spectator at a tennis match. I was stunned, not just by the ultimatum, but by the sheer audacity, the complete disregard for my feelings, for my adult status, for everything I had contributed. It wasn't an invitation to stay, it was a command, a stripping away of my identity within that house. My own room. The one place I truly felt was mine was now unequivocally Jessica's, and I was expected to just accept it. The anger that had been simmering for months bowled over. My vision tunneled. I stood up, my chair scraping loudly against the floor. I didn't yell back. I didn't say another word. I just looked at them, at my mom's furious face, at my dad's meek agreement, at Jessica's uncomfortable silence. And in that moment, a cold, hard resolve settled in my chest. They wanted me to move out, fine. I would move out. But I would do it on my own terms in a way they would never forget. I walked away from the table, went straight to my guest room and started packing. I didn't say goodnight. I didn't explain. I just packed a single bag with essentials, called a friend, and asked if I could crash on his couch for a few nights. He, bless his soul, didn't ask questions, just said, come on over, man. So that's the situation I was in, and I had to make a choice. Before I tell you what happened next, I want you to pause and comment below what you would have done in my shoes. Would you have just given in and stayed in the guest room, or would you have walked away? And if you walked away, how would you have handled the sheer audacity of being told to give up your room or move out? Because my choice was pretty extreme. I spent the next few days at my friend's place, stewing. The anger didn't dissipate, it solidified into a plan. I still had my promotion money, and my savings were substantial. I had been looking for houses in a different part of the city, but after that dinner, a new, audacious idea started to form. I opened up real estate websites, but this time I focused my search. I typed in our neighborhood. I filtered for houses that were significantly larger, significantly more expensive than anything my parents could ever dream of owning. And then I zoomed in on one specific street theirs. I found it. A beautiful, newly renovated, modern farmhouse-style house sitting proudly on a corner lot. It was grand with huge windows, a meticulously landscaped yard, and an impressive curb appeal. And it was directly across the street from my parents' house. Not next door, not down the block, but literally facing their front door, clearly visible from their living room, their kitchen, their bedroom windows. The price tag, a cool $1.2 million. It was a stretch, even with my promotion, but it was doable. It would drain nearly all my savings, but I had enough for the down payment and some initial furnishings, and the sheer unadulterated satisfaction it promised, priceless. I called the real estate agent that very day. I toured the house the next morning. It was even more stunning in person. Huge, open-concept living spaces, a gourmet kitchen, a luxurious master suite with a SPAC-like bathroom, and best of all, a massive office that could easily double as a guest room. It was the antithesis of the cramped guest room my parents had relegated me to. And the view from the upstairs window, a direct, unobstructed line of sight in my parents' front yard, their driveway, even their living room if the curtains were open. It was perfect. I made an offer, which was accepted within hours. The housing market was hot, and I moved quickly, fueled by a mix of anger, determination, and a strange sense of vindication. The closing process was a blur of paperwork, signatures, and wire transfers. I kept it all a secret. I didn't tell my friend. I certainly didn't tell my parents. I wanted the reveal to be as impactful as possible. The day I got the keys was surreal. I drove my modest car, now dwarfed by the massive house, across the street from my parents' place. They were home. I could see my mom puttering in the garden. I pulled into the expansive driveway of my new house. I got out, a wide, slow smile spreading across my face. I watched as my mom straightened up, noticing my car. Her brow furrowed, clearly confused. She probably thought I was visiting someone. Then she saw me, walking towards the front door of the 1.2 million house, the key gleaming in my hand. Her jaw dropped. I could see her through the distance, her mouth agape. She called out to my dad, who emerged from the house, wiping his hands on a towel. He saw me, too. Their faces were a mixture of shock, confusion, and then slowly a dawning horror. I unlocked the door, pushed it open, and stepped inside, turning back to offer them a small, polite wave. Then I closed the door. The satisfaction was immense. The phone call started almost immediately. First from my mom. She was frantic, demanding to know what I was doing, whose house that was, if I was playing some kind of elaborate prank. I let it ring a few times before answering, my voice calm, almost unnervingly so. "It's my house, Mom," I said, a hint of steel in my tone. "I bought it. Across the street, just like you wanted me to move out." There was a stunned silence on the other end. Then the yelling started. "You bought that house? How could you afford that? What is wrong with you?" She accused me of being wasteful, of trying to humiliate them, of being vindictive. My dad got on the phone, too, equally bewildered, but also with an undercurrent of something that sounded like respect. A grudging admiration, perhaps. For the sheer audacity of it all, I calmly explained that I had saved diligently, that my promotion had made it possible, and that since they had made it clear I wasn't welcome in my own room, I had found a new one. A much, much bigger one. I also pointed out that I could see their house perfectly from my living room and that it was quite a nice view. The passive-aggressive digs were deliberate, and I savored every moment. Jessica called me a few days later, sounding genuinely upset. She apologized profusely, said she never intended for any of this to happen, and felt terrible that her presence had caused such a rift. I appreciated her apology, but the damage was done. I told her it wasn't her fault. Not really. She was just a pawn in my parents' game of control. She eventually found her own place, moving out a few weeks later, unable to bear the awkwardness of the situation, and probably the weight of my 1.2 million shadow looming across the street. My parents, on the other hand, reacted in predictable fashion. They went from anger to a bizarre form of passive aggression. They'd occasionally wave stiffly when they saw me, or sometimes they'd conspicuously close their curtains if they saw me outside. But I knew every time they glanced across the street, they were forced to confront the monument to their ultimatum, the testament to my stubbornness. I hosted housewarming parties, inviting all our extended family and friends, making sure to have everyone gathered in my expansive living room, gazing out at my parents' considerably smaller home. I saw the looks on their faces, the whispers among the aunts and uncles. It wasn't about gloating, not entirely. It was about making a point. A very expensive point, that I was an adult capable of making my own choices and that their attempts to control me had backfired spectacularly. Life in my new house has been incredible. I finally have the space, the privacy, and the independence I craved. My relationship with my parents is still strained, though it's slowly thawing. They still haven't fully acknowledged their role in pushing me to this extreme, but there's a new, undeniable respect in their tone. They visit sometimes, always admiring the house, almost as if they can't believe their own son pulled this off. And sometimes late at night when the lights are low, I'll stand by my living room window and look across the street at their house, and I'll smile. It was an extreme measure, absolutely. But it was also the only way I could truly reclaim my own space, my own identity, and my own sense of self. It taught me that sometimes to gain your freedom, you have to be willing to make a very, very grand statement. So that's my story. It was a wild ride, and certainly not the path I expected my life to take, but I wouldn't change it for anything. My 1.2 million house isn't just a home, it's a monument to my independence. If you were on my side and you think I was right to stand up for myself, even if it was a little over the top, then please like this video. And if you want to hear more stories about people pushing back against impossible family situations, then subscribe for more stories like this. Share your final thoughts on this whole mess in the comments section below. Tell me, was it too much or was it exactly what they deserved? I'll see you all in the next story.